Okay, let's continue with the 9mm Luger rounds. We have the cases clean. We have deprimed and resized them. Discussed cleaning the primer pockets. We've run them through the expander die to slightly expand the mouth of the case. If you actually look at the inside edge of it, you can see where they've been slightly expanded. We think we're at a good starting point there. We're going to prime these cases next before we add powder to them. There's two principal ways of priming that are especially used by beginners. One of them would be a little priming tool like this that comes with most single stage or turret presses. It simply drops in here. There's actually two different sizes, and you can tell from the difference in the size of the opening. One of them is larger than the other. One would be for large primers, whether it's rifle or pistol, and one is for small primers, whether it's rifle or pistol. It simply drops into this convenient slot in the ram. The shell holder goes back in. As the ram comes down, this lever will allow the primer that will be in this little cup to go underneath, and it will drive it up and seat it in the cartridge. This is one way. So let's do a case this way to show you. You want your hands to be clean and dry because you are going to have to handle primers a little bit to do this step. The primers, by the way, are in these cases for a reason. Smokeless powder is an accelerant technically, even though it goes off with an explosive type force because it's enclosed in a small area. The compound in primers, however, is a true explosive. It's not recommended in the early stages that you use the primer feeders and this sort of thing, because handling bulk primers itself has its own set of hazards associated with it. You want to take the primer and handle them as little as possible, although CCI has confirmed to me that normal handling will not contaminate the primer compound in the bottom of it. You want to put it in this little priming cup here. Let's see if we can zoom in a little bit closer so you can actually see it in the cup. And when you put a case in here and raise the handle, the lever swings underneath, and you push it a little bit further and it seats it. If this comes out, you can see the primer has been seated in the case with this little device. Now, a couple of things about seating primers. To be seated properly, they should be around 2 to 4 thousandths of an inch recessed from the surface of the case. Now, that's not something that you can feel, but you can definitely feel if they're protruding. You also can technically measure that insertion depth. If you take your caliper, most calipers have a protrusion on the end of them here. There's a little spot that sticks out at the end of the case, and technically that is a depth gauge of sorts. And so you can technically measure, if you'll notice, that's now flat in the case, and the meter is reading 4 thousandths of an inch. So we actually have 4 thousandths of an inch, well, now it's saying 5. Let's play with it here, there. Okay, that's, well, I'm monkeying around with it because I'm trying to do this on the video, but it's about 4 thousandths inserted. That's the correct amount of the depth. Another easy test for it, and let me back this out a tiny bit so you can see this. Another easy test for it is to simply set them flat on the table. There should be no rocking at all, as long as the primer is not protruding past the edge of the case. Now, it's pretty near impossible to seat them substantially too deep unless you've actually overly reamed the primer pockets. The depth of the primer pocket should be a limiting factor, and the length of this, which is spring-loaded when it comes up here, there's a limit to how far this will allow the primer to be pushed into the case. So this is one way of priming cases, but it requires handling the primers each time to put them one at a time in here and put them in here. Now, there's a lot of leverage here, so there's not a lot of sensitivity to feeling the primer going into the case. I prefer a method of priming cases using a hand priming tool, and I particularly like the RCBS hand priming tool. It consists of a tray the primers go in and the device that actually does the insertion of the primers. There is a set of a plunger and white connector here for small primers, and then there's a black set with a different plunger that's easy to interchange for large primers. But this is easy to use. What you do is you simply take the cover off this case. I do 10 primers at a time. I don't like to handle substantially more than that at one time, simply because of the hazards involved. Put the tray over top of the primers, turn it over, and the primers are now in the tray, and they're right side up. Right side up meaning the open side up, because it's the open side that needs to go into the case. You simply take this cover, put it on, and snap it into place. And there's even a gate here which keeps the primers from advancing into the priming tool, except when you want to let them through. So you put this in here, open the gate, I let the primers go through one or two at a time at the most, and then I close the gate so that no extras can't go in. You take your case, put it in this universal shell holder, aim it away from your face, because if you ever set a primer off, you want the explosion to be going through the case and out away from your face. You simply squeeze the handle, and it's inserted the primer. Always I take my finger and I run it across the primer before I put it back in the shell holder, simply because I can feel that it's very slightly recessed. So I check to see if I have another primer. If I don't, I shake another primer into the priming section here, put the shell on, squeeze it, and I feel it, drop it in here. The next one, I have a primer already in there, put this in here, squeeze it, feel it, put it away. You can see how fast and efficient this is. Let another primer in, shake it down so that you can see it on top of the little mandrel. Put the case in place, squeeze it, and it's done. So we're going to continue and finish priming these, hand priming these using this tool, and then we'll proceed to our powder measuring.